Welcome back, everyone, once again to the Football Goons podcast. This week, we're looking at part 2 of our 2018 NFL Draft Preview Series. And we're taking a deeper look at the defensive tackles, defensive ends, and the offensive linemen in this draft class. If you missed last week's episode, you're going to want to go back and listen so you can catch up on part 1. We talked about the defensive backs and the linebackers in this draft class. As we get through tonight, we'll be moving more into the skill positions over the next couple weeks, leading up to our live Goons mock draft, which is always just a ton of fun every single year. And then, of course, it'll be NFL draft time. Before we get into anything else tonight, debate came up over the last couple days, and I thought I'd bring you guys into the loop on this one. So I'm asking you, what is the best flavor of Dorito out of the Cool Ranch and the nacho cheese varieties?
It's definitely nacho cheese.
Yeah,
oh my God.
You're so wrong.
Okay, here's what I'll say.
Cooler Ranch.
Here's what I'll say. If you get the extremely rare, like 1 in 1,000 Cool Ranch that actually has some seasoning on it, that's better. But more often than not, a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos is a bag of tortilla chips. So for me, the nacho cheese is the way to go because every one of them tastes fantastic. And then the 1 out of 1,000 that has the extra is heaven.
Gosh, I love it when you talk dirty to me.
It's Cooler Ranch and it's not close.
It's not even kind of close.
It's not. Thank you. I can't believe that me and you are the ones that are in agreement
so
here.
Why
Like,
would
this
you
is incredible.
pay more than like just buy some Tostitos? It's a cheaper bag. And you can make nachos out of it or something.
Why is it called Cooler Ranch? What is it cooler than?
It's
That
cooler than
is-
you.
So wait,
well,
are
that's
you
not hard. That's a low bar.
Are you just shutting it out because of the name? Because that's just silly. Because it tastes better than I think nacho cheese Doritos are like so much more bland than Cooler Ranch. Just
What's going on? What's going on with your tongue?
What's
It's not
wrong
working-
with my
it's not
tongue?
working right. It's not
You're
working
sure how to
right.
taste things.
Listen,
Yeah.
How is it bland?
if the tongue is connected to the stomach, I think it's doing just fine. Like, I know I'm the fattest of this group. I should get this final say on all food-related matters.
But see, here's my thing with the Cool Ranch and just about any other kind of chip. I tend to, before I even open a bag, I give it an upside down flip, and then I give it another right side up flip to redistribute all of the contents of the bag so that you don't get to the bottom of the bag and you're like, wow, all the seasoning was just sitting in the bottom corner of this bag.
The fact that your snack comes with chores. My snack does not come with chores.
Yeah.
It's a pre-snack cardio workout.
No
Yeah.
thanks. I just want a snack. That's it.
Yeah.
And anytime that you can eat something that makes your breath smell like you threw up, like I'm gonna go ahead and pass. I like Cooler Ranch Doritos, even though it's a ridiculous name, and even though they're not better than nacho cheese, not nacho ear cheese. They make your breath smell like trash, man. Like straight trash.
Nacho weird cheese.
I would venture to say that Cool Ranch is not even a top 5 Dorito flavor.
Ooh, that's rough.
I mean, I
It's
like
just
those
not.
spicy ones. Those spicy, what's
The
that called?
sweet chili Johns
Oh,
are phenomenal.
Yeah, that's what.
When they did the
You-
combos with like the pizza
Miles,
and stuff,
Miles
that
got
was
me.
good too.
Miles got me hooked on the sweet chili ones last year.
They're
I never had
phenomenal.
them.
What's
before
that?
That was
There's
a life
another
changer for me.
spicy
I'll
one,
admit
too.
that. But I don't know why. I just those nacho cheese ones are just like the most plain bland chips to me. Like that's like they're the worst by a lot to me.
All right, so here's the deal. At Football Goons on the Twitter, we're going to put up a poll question following this
Don't
show.
be wrong. Come on,
We
America.
want you to vote. Is it nacho cheese? Is it Cooler Ranch? All right. And you could weigh in with your comments right on the poll question too. So if you feel strongly one way or another about it, we want to hear from you. Don't just click and vote. We want to know why as well at Football Goons on the Twitter. All right, let's get into some NFL discussion here.
I just don't know that I even want to continue
Yeah, it feels
this
like
evening.
we could just shut this down.
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it hurts to be wrong. I know, but you know,
I know you know.
let's get into our weekly
You
recap.
know so well.
All All right, let's talk about our weekly recap here. Not a terribly crazy week in contrast to the past couple as far as NFL news was concerned. A couple free agent signings this week. So the first question right out of the gate, I want to know which free agent move that was made this past week do you like the most, and which do you like the least?
I jumped in, and Miles' thought process from last week was on my mind while I was doing this, and I actually went with Allen Hurns to the Cowboys. Besides the fact that it fits the need, like we joked around last week about how much wide receivers were getting paid. I feel like the Cowboys just stole Allen Hurns at this rate. I just to compare numbers to two guys, I took Hurns and Watkins, who came out in the same draft class. Hurns has 2669 and 21 for his career. Watkins only slightly higher at 3,052 and 25 for his career, and he got $10 million more dollars. So, like, I feel like the Cowboys got him on the cheap and filled the position in need. And Hurns goes somewhere where he feels wanted and feels like he can compete for a starting job, which is really all he wanted, because they preferred Allen Robinson, and then they preferred Marquise Lee, and now Dede Westbrook, and like Hurns just keeps getting bumped down the list, even though he's probably been their most consistent receiver other than Robinson, who's now also out the door. So,
actually, I didn't. Excuse me. I don't know how much I'm crazy about that, if for no reason other than Dallas has really, really shown that they love Terrence Williams for some ungodly reason, including the big contract they gave him. So I kind of think it's going to be difficult for Hurns to see the field unless they do, which I think is still a possibility, unless they do move on from Des Bryant. But I don't see him taking Terrence Williams' job because they love Terrence Williams.
I just view them as very different receivers. I think
right,
I think Terrence Williams better in the slot and get Cole Beasley off the field for.
Well, that's not happening. They're not getting Cole Beasley off the field, and if they do, it's for Ryan Switzer. I mean that's a great slot receiver. As much as we like to pick on Cole Beasley, he's really good at what he does, and that's not Hurns or Williams' game. You can't have Hurns, Williams, and Dez on the field. You're completely missing the underneath routes there. Yeah. So, I mean, listen, the money, great. I totally agree with you there, because if they'd have given him this $8 million a year everyone else is getting, then it's a stupid signing. I mean, it's a good problem to have when you've got NFL caliber receivers on the bench. I mean, so I'm not going to disagree with your signing. I'll just say it's not my favorite. My favorite was actually my boy Vinny Curry going to the Tampa Bay Bucks. They paid him too much, I think, but Vinny Curry's an underrated player. I think he got overlooked in Philadelphia because he's on the same defensive line as two All-Pros, and he's not one of them. So, the Bucks needed help on defense at every level, a ton. And Vinny gives them an opportunity, and we kind of talked about this last week with the draft coming up, that optionality thing. And we were talking about it with Carlos Hyde to the Browns. Now they don't have to take Barkley. Well, the Bucks don't have to take a pass rusher now. They can look into the secondary. They can even go on the offensive side of the ball if it falls that way. So I just really like the fact that Vinny Curry brings some athleticism, great run-stopping prowess on the outside, on the edge for them, something they're sorely lacking. Veteran presence on the team. I just really like that signing for the Bucks.
Yeah, I'm going to give you mine. Mine was Mike Wallace going to the Eagles. I think it's just a good fit for both sides. I mean, he needed a place to go where he didn't have to be – he can kind of be more low profile. He's at the point where he does one thing really well. That's all the Eagles are going to ask him to do. He's going to kind of take over that Torrey Smith role of opening things up in the deeper game. Probably has, some competition from Mac Hollins, but it's a short-term deal. The money is right. And for the Eagles, you basically flip Torrey Smith for Mike Wallace, freed up some cash. It's really not a bad deal for either side. It's a good fit opposite of Alshon Jeffrey, Nelson Aguilar working, those more intermediate underneath routes, Zach Ertz. It makes them actually more dangerous on paper, I believe. So just another area where they got better. I will say Frank Gore was a close second for me.
Ooh.
Wow. My number one is Eric Ebron to the Colts, and even if I wasn't a Colts fan, it would still be a big one for me. Eric Ebron is still a really good tight end. Now he's getting paid as the number 16 tight end in the league, which I'm totally fine with, especially given the Colts cap room. And we're forgetting that the dude was drafted, number 10 a couple years ago for a reason, because he's a really good tight end. Now the Colts got a guy that, would the Colts have drafted him in number 10? No, of course not, but they didn't have to. They got him for pretty cheap, and he has the 5th most receptions of all time for a tight end at the age of 24, which is pretty crazy to think about given his health, that he hasn't always been healthy. He's had some downtime and been mostly neglected even when healthy. So I think it's a great signing. If Andrew Luck is healthy again, which again we're assuming he's going to be, he loves the tight end. He's going to make Eric Ebron worthy of that number 10 draft slot, and the Colts didn't have to draft him there.
I actually think your 2 tight end sets are now excellent because what Jack Doyle does lack in that explosiveness, you get out of Ebron.
Absolutely.
And what Ebron lacks in the consistency and the blue-like hands, that's what Jack Doyle has. So the 2 tight end set becomes pretty scary in Indy, especially like you said, when you consider how much Andrew Luck enjoys his tight ends.
Right.
So how about moves that we didn't necessarily like?
You know what? I didn't think we were going to fight this much. South, I couldn't disagree with you more. The move I went with was Frank Gore to Miami.
Me too.
Like, you know why? Like, I understand it's smart, it's money, he goes home kind of. My biggest thing with this is like Frank Gore so much deserves a better end to his career than playing for the Miami Dolphins this season.
He should have retired.
Like, or go play for someone who you at least like
wasn't there.
Go but that's fine. But like, then retire. Then the deal's right. Then retire. Like, you're going to go out on a really, really poor note, and like. He doesn't have. We talk about Frank Gore all the time. He doesn't have like this illustrious career, except that he does. Like, he's a top 10 all-time rusher, and it's just Mr. Consistency. Honestly, I view him the same way as a Jets fan. I view Curtis Martin. Never the best running back in the league, but never worse than like 7 or 8, and for his entire career. And then just puts together a fantastic career worth of numbers. And now he's going to get lost in Miami with. Like, I don't know. I just feel like a guy like that deserves so much better.
Yeah, I don't mind it for Frank. Just because if you feel like you still have it, then by all means keep playing. I mean, and if that's his only deal, then that's his only deal. I just didn't get it from the Dolphins end of things. Like, listen, you're not going to win this year. I mean, I know we see anything can happen. You never know. Maybe they'll win the Super Bowl. Who knows?
They won't.
Well, who knows? I mean. It seems ridiculous right now, but who knows? But for me, like, I guess you can't have the mentality, we're not winning this year. Why would you not want to see if Kenyon Drake is a feature running back? That's the thing I don't love. Frank Gore's not going there to get 6 carries a game. They're going to split. They're going to split just like he had maybe a little more control of Indy's backfield than he will this year, but I don't understand not handing the reins to Kenyon Drake, and maybe they will. And if maybe this is where you're going with this, South, if Frank Gore's just the number 2 guy and he comes in and spells Drake every once in a while or maybe gets the hard yardage, though I'd like to see if Kenyon Drake can get the hard yardage, then I don't hate it for them. I guess I just want to see the role. But if they want a 50-50 split this thing, I don't get it.
Yeah, see, for me, I think he's more of a compliment at this point. And I think given what they paid him, the league veteran minimum, really there's no commitment to him, basically. They probably said to him, like, look, we'd love to have you here, but we've got guys here in this role that we like. So more than anything for me, why I love this move is because they've basically, whether we agree with it, like how they're doing it, trust it, they're turning over basically the entire roster.
Right.
They need some kind of leaders on the team. And by all accounts, Frank Gore has always been a great locker room guy. So now you have a guy who is a solid locker room guy. He's a guy that some of these young kids could lean on, and it takes some of the every single down pressure off of Kenyon Drake, who you want to see what you have there. So if it works out that Drake is the every down guy, then great. But if it's not, you don't have to force it now because you have Frank Gore to spell him in certain situations.
I went with the brand new one. I actually changed mine before the podcast here. I went with one that came in just an hour ago. Drew Stanton to the Browns. Browns, what is you doing? you don't need another quarterback to back up all your other backup quarterbacks. Now, the contract numbers didn't come in yet. Unless it's $9 a year, it's a terrible signing. And if it's $9 a year, like you should have bought whoever you draft at number 1 or number 4 some Gatorade and not spent $9 on Drew Stanton backing up your other 4 guys. It is a ridiculous. I don't care how much money you have in cap space. This is just to the point where the Browns are like, we got all this money. We got to spend it. Let's just start calling people. Drew, do you want to play? Like, you want to come sit on our bench at 33-year-old backup to our other 4 backups? Does that sound good, Drew? You want to do that, Drew? All right, come on.
To be fair to the Browns, Kaiser is now gone. They're going to draft a quarterback, and he's probably going to sit for the whole first year.
Okay,
more than likely.
They have Tyrod Taylor,
and now you need another backup and a camp arm. Like
no.
You just do. You're not gonna draft. They're probably going to go with like in the Darnold or Allen version. And if they go Allen's definitely not going to see the field at all for a single second this year. It's not going to happen. It's going to be Christian Hackenberg.
Neither is Drew Stanton.
Good. But if Tyrod goes down, which he has, he is a little bit more of a mobile quarterback, and that chance is always there. You have a competent backup quarterback. Not that the Browns are going to make the playoffs or win the Super Bowl or anything, but like
certainly,
you know what I mean. Like you need at least 3 quarterbacks.
Is he any better than?
I'd rather give
Kevin Hogan and Cody Kessler.
I'd rather give the reps to Cody Kessler all day.
Yeah, why not? Give it to anybody else than a 33-year-old Drew Stanton. That's ridiculous.
I mean, unless you think that has potential of being a future coach.
I clearly don't.
Of being a future coach, basically. And being a guy who now you have on your team kind of as like a player coach role. Because who knows? Like, look at some of these former quarterbacks that have come out and been pretty decent coaches. So maybe you're bringing him just for like the mentor aspect of it. But even then, you know what I mean? Like that's a really weird hire all across the board.
Really weird.
All right, I'm going with a name that has come out of my mouth quite often, Jeremy Hill to the Patriots. I do not understand this move at all. Number one, because Jeremy Hill sucks. He is terrible. He is one of the worst running backs, overhyped running backs in the history of the NFL, and I will die on that mountain if I have to. All right. Beyond that, you have zero need for him other than I think that the Patriots get like they sit back and giggle at the prospect of, oh, now all these fantasy football owners are going to think that we're going to revive Jeremy Hill and he's going to get the New England bump. No. Like they just re-upped Rex Burkhead. Rex Burkhead is going to have his 4 weeks.
He's far better than Jeremy Hill.
Right. Like it just doesn't make any sense at all. I don't understand it. I cannot figure out how Jeremy Hill has an NFL job. How he's not playing for the Toronto Argonauts just baffles me. So that move is my least favorite by a lot.
You know what's going to happen?
I can't wait to draft him.
I was going to say, you know what's going to happen? Jeremy Hill is going to break out because that's what happens. Like, I'm going to be so aggravated come like September when Jeremy Hill in like the second game of the year has 3 rushing touchdowns.
And then he does nothing again he's inactive for the rest of the season.
He's going to be Mike Gillislee 2.0. I'm not falling for that trap again.
Right. He's going to score 3 times in the first 2 weeks and then he's inactive for the next 15 games.
Well, then draft him, start him weeks 1 and 2, and then bench him for the rest of the
time. Trade him to Rocco week 3.
I'm giving him the deal Jamal Charles treatment. I will not touch him. All right. 13 teams sent representatives to watch Johnny Manziel throw passes at the San Diego State Pro Day this week. Can Johnny Manziel legitimately play in the NFL again? And if you believe that he can, what's an ideal fit for him?
Browns, what is you doing?
Well played.
Yeah, I went ahead and said no, and nobody's been a bigger Johnny fan, like going back to Texas A&M than me. I wanted him so badly to be a good, competent quarterback, and he's just not that guy. I feel like even if he turns his life around, and I hope for his life that he does, we've already learned that his style of play does not really compute in the NFL long term. So like I don't see like he may wind up on a roster somewhere, but like I don't think an NFL comeback short of being somebody's backup quarterback, I don't see that for Johnny Manziel.
I mean, I think that's really his only shot at this point, to come in, be a backup, and then get a shot because a guy gets hurt or just falls apart. You know, has a week where he throws 4 picks in the first half and he comes in and takes the world by storm. I think that's his only shot. I don't realistically think anybody is going to sign him to be their immediate starter. I think that's ridiculous,
No.
Especially before the draft and even after the draft, really. But I do think he has a shot to get signed somewhere. Because it seems like he's taking it pretty seriously. You haven't heard anything about him getting in trouble. I think he got married, right? That might mean something. I don't know. So maybe doesn't mean anything. But it seems like he's settled down just in his life a little bit, hopefully for his sake, not just for his career. But I think he has a shot to come in somewhere and be a backup. I'll actually be pretty surprised if we go into the season and he's not signed to at least be a backup somewhere.
Yeah, I don't see why you wouldn't. Honestly, he's only 25. It seems like he has life at least somewhat figured out. I think the only thing holding him back is the same thing holding Colin Kaepernick back, which is weird because he went to Twitter to defend himself this week on like Cap and I are not the same. It was more defending Kaepernick than it was defending him. But that's beside the point. To me, the only thing holding both of those guys back is NFL teams do not want the media circus that comes with bringing them in when your intention is not to play him. Your backup quarterback should shut up, get a couple reps, and hold a clipboard. Yeah, I mean, that's Drew Stanton. We just talked about him. He's been doing it for a decade, and he's still around. And nobody wants press conferences about the backup quarterback.
Unless he's winning Super Bowls.
Right. The only time you do that, you bring in a guy with that press problem is like the Eagles did with Michael Vick. Right. That's Michael Vick, man.
When it was
like – he was an MVP candidate multiple times. We'll give that a shot. I mean, Johnny Manziel, not an MVP candidate. Let's just be nice about it. You know, I mean, so do I want to put that media circus around it? Probably not, but it's the same thing I'll say about Kaepernick. Please look around the quarterback landscape of this league and tell me he's not one of the 90 best quarterbacks in the world. Like, of course he is. And he's only 25. So I would hope someone gives him another shot, and I hope he runs with it.
Yeah, I agree with basically everything that you guys said, and I have a specific scenario where I like a team to take a chance on him. You know, I do think that he could be a backup, but if the Buffalo Bills strike out on getting a quarterback in this draft, you might as well go all in, full tilt, bring in Johnny Manziel, because there's your media market where it's small enough that it's probably not a gigantic disaster. It's not like going to New York, like New York City. Technically Buffalo, New York. But you go to the Bills, you see basically, does he still have it? Maybe we can move him in a trade if he shows that he could still play eventually. Maybe he is the guy. Maybe he's not, and we just tank it and we get our quarterback next year. So I mean, I think there's specific situations like that, but I do agree that he really is at this point, has to come in and prove it as a backup before anything else. All right, let's take a pause here and talk about our friends at Gorb. All right, we're going to get into some NFL draft talk. And if there's one thing that's pretty consistent across the board with a lot of these players in the NFL draft, it's that they're hungry to go after their opportunity to make it into the NFL and show what they've got. They want to take their chance to shine and just run with it. And that's what I like about being partnered up with our friends at Gorb. That's GHORBH, if you're wondering. But our friends at Gorb remind us that in life, you've only got 2 choices. You can either get hungry or you can be hungry. And getting hungry is what I envision these NFL draft prospects are doing. They've got a dream and they're working hard every single day and pushing so that they don't have to wonder what would have happened if I didn't go after this and just be hungry all the time. They've made the commitment to get hungry, and now you can do the same thing. Check out gorb.com, GHORBH.com. You can get all kinds of great gear, shirts, hats, hoodies, all kinds of great stuff, all styles, all colors for guys, gals, kids. They've got you all covered to give you that constant reminder when you wear it to get hungry or be hungry. And you could also be a part of the social media movement that's taking over at hashtag Gorb. GHORBH.com. Check it out today. All right, guys, let us talk about the NFL draft. All right. It's a favorite topic of ours in general. And we're diving into part 2 as we preview the defensive line prospects and the offensive line prospects. Probably not overall the sexiest group, but I think we've seen over the last couple of years just how important it is to be dominant at the line of scrimmage. Let's dive in here with some of the defensive line prospects, specifically at the defensive tackle position. Among the names being discussed with a chance to be picked on night number 1, which is your favorite out of this group? All right, so obviously there's a varying range of where some of these guys can fall. I just grouped guys who basically are getting some discussion for night 1. So among the names, Vita Vea, Maurice Hurst, Daron Payne, or Taven Bryan are your most popular guys on night 1. Who do you like the most out of that group?
I like Payne the most, and part of that's because I watch a lot of SEC football. I feel a little bad about going through this night. The questions that you sent us, it becomes very, very clear that I'm a Georgia fan, but I watch a lot of SEC football, and Payne has some small motor issues, I guess, but when it was time to go, the guy was virtually unblockable in the college football playoff. When he played against Clemson and Georgia in those 2 games, he took over. That's the kind of guy as he grows up and matures and gets in an NFL locker room, hopefully one of those locker rooms that's not going to put up with laziness, he's going to be unbelievable. He's going to be one of those guys that's a steal. I like all 4 names for different reasons, but for me, Payne has the strongest all-around game. And you're seeing the league really lean towards even those interior linemen. You have to be a pass rusher to be effective, and that's what Payne is. He's a wrecker in there. So for me, I'm going Payne. I could be convinced on any of the 4, but that's my guy.
See, my issue with Payne is like what we talk about all the time when we talk about Alabama defenders. Like, you're literally playing with at least 7 other guys that are going to be in the NFL, right, and nobody else has that. So, I think Payne obviously benefits from that. Not that he's not a great defender himself, but he definitely benefits from that. I like Vita Vea just because I think he's as good as Daron Payne, except he doesn't have 7 other guys that are going to play in the NFL around him. You know what I mean? Like, he is the focal point of that defense, and he makes that group go. And he's just as talented as Payne or anyone else in this group. He's an absolute monster. He eats up the middle and gets his nose in on most of those plays as well. So for me, it's Vea just because he doesn't have the benefit of playing on the Alabama defense.
Yeah, I actually went with Vea too for a couple of reasons. When I'm looking at defensive tackle, I want a big, huge body, a guy that's really strong, and a guy that's getting in the way at the right time. There's been a lot of guys that have been huge and got, just clogged up space, but he's not that guy. He's athletic enough to always get in the way, and he's good at reading plays. My man did 41 reps at the bench press in the combine. Unbelievable. He was 7 or 8 off the all-time record. He's an animal freak athlete for being his size at 6'4", 347, and still running around a 540, which isn't that important, but just shows how athletic he is.
Yeah, I went with the SEC as well, but I'm going to Florida with Taven Bryan. Look, the issue with him...
You would.
You're right, I would.
He did.
The issue with him is inconsistency. And I think you're going to find that with a lot of players who started out playing football a little bit later in life. Bryan was not the kind of kid who grew up playing the game. He jumped into it late in the process here, but almost on just freakish athleticism alone was able to get himself into the position that he was at Florida. when he was on, he was unstoppable. But then there were times where he was not as consistent and he just kind of got eaten up. I think that if he gets the right coaching situation, obviously, they can fix some of that. I think a lot of it is just technique from not having played a very long time. But I just watch him on tape, and at times, like, he kind of shows some of that initial like speed and burst of a guy like JJ Watt. And like, I'm not going to compare him to JJ because nobody really does, but he's got some of that freakish athleticism that Watt has showed, and I could work with that. So I mean, he's my favorite guy in this class. I don't hate any of these guys, though, to just kind of throw that out there. So, and I didn't purposely go Florida.
Yeah, you did.
Now, if you were doing anything on purpose, you'd have gone with the Michigan man there.
Yes, I would.
And I think it's funny that the one we didn't mention, Maurice Hurst, I think all four of us would be on board with somebody saying that. Thankfully he's cleared from the scare at the combine, but
Oh yeah.
he's one of those guys that his initial step, you don't see that.
Yeah, and I think all four of us would be more than happy to have him on our team.
Oh yeah.
So, he's just that kind of player. So I just think for me, the other guys kind of jump off the page a little bit more. So, all right, of the remaining defensive tackles in the class, give me a guy who kind of jumps out at you and you think is a little bit of a sleeper pick.
I pick Harrison Phillips. He's not as far down of a sleeper, but not a guy we listed here. He's actually the only guy that beat Vita Vea at the bench press. He put up 42. Also a big body. One of my favorite things, compliments on him or strengths, said he's big boned and burly. That's something you want out of your defensive tackle. He had a monster year, 103 tackles, 17 for loss, 7.5 sacks, and 2 forced fumbles in the middle of the field, like where you shouldn't have all of that. So he's a huge body. Also, not the athlete that Vita Vea is, but he's going to be a difference maker, and you're going to get him for probably pretty cheap here.
Yeah, I went with a day 3 guy from the University of Georgia, Trenton Thompson. It's and part of this comes, we're talking about interior defensive line. This is not, you have to dig deeper than you do to talk about the quarterback class.
Sure.
So part of the reason I'm going with this guy is I've watched him for several years every Saturday, and I've watched him unfortunately not play as much as I would like, and I'm sure that he would like, because he's definitely dealt with injuries his entire career at Georgia. But he was a major recruit coming out of high school. Every time he was on the field, he showed that ability. He showed the toughness because he's played through as many injuries as he can. And what I like most about Trenton Thompson versus some other defensive line prospects, including the one some of us just talked about, this guy's motor never stops, ever stops. He's chasing plays down from the backside. And that's why you like, going back to last year's draft, I mean, I was pumped when the Eagles take Derek Barnett because he never stopped. He's chasing down screens across the field, 20 yards downfield. And that's the kind of player Thompson is as well. You just hope that he leaves his injury history back in Athens, Georgia. But I mean, it's a day 3 prospect. So you're not killing yourself if he doesn't work out.
Does it concern you? He's pretty small.
Here's the thing, and you'll see this with a couple of these defensive line prospects. Aaron Donald's pretty small, and I know he's not Aaron Donald, and
they're a little different.
But my point there is that the league is sort of, while it's nice to have that big boned and burly, you could certainly succeed as a quote unquote undersized interior lineman, because the game's getting faster, so the offensive linemen are getting faster and therefore more svelte. So you can handle being a little bit smaller as well. So, you say he's small. He doesn't weigh 240. You know what I mean? Like,
what is he, like
small,
280 or something, right?
Yeah, he's small compared to Vita Vea.
Right.
So are most human beings. So
almost everybody.
Almost all of them. So I think it's more, he's going to be the type of player that's not going to fit in every scheme, every position. He's obviously not your nose tackle. He probably fits a lot more in an even front than an odd front. But
sure. The
point is, if you're the right team where, these guys, the scouts and coaches know what players fit their scheme.
Match him up with Vita Vea.
If they're your 2, you're in pretty good shape. So it's just, your scheme. Can you handle a little bit of undersized at defensive tackle? And if you can, the effort's there.
Right.
you talk about undersized, so I'm going to go the complete opposite and go with BJ Hill from NC State, 6'3", 321. For that size, he ran under 5 seconds in the 40.
It's crazy.
He's probably like a 5th round talent, but this is a guy who's just an absolute mountain in the middle of a defense. He's not going to do anything for you, most likely as an elite pass rusher from the position, but you're not going to run against him. You're just not going to do it. So if you're a team who's looking for a guy who can just come in alongside of your edge rushers and just be dominant in stopping the run, this is your guy. And I think in the 5th round, he could be an absolute steal.
And I went with a guy. I went with Lolo Tulele, and I wrote because Bloodlines, obviously Star's younger brother. But no, in all serious, he was a freshman All-American. Then he was honorable mention for the Pac-12 as a freshman. Then he got back-to-back Pac-12 All-Conference teams. He's just a mammoth guy. He's not very tall. He's only 6'2", but 315. He's strong. And honestly, I think sometimes we forget about these kind of things. When a guy has a brother in the league already, he's kind of comfortable around that. You know what I mean? Like, I'm sure he's been around it a little bit more. So there might not be as big of an adjustment period to NFL life coming out of college. And I like that for some of these younger guys that have been around that before or have seen that or have a relatively, I think JJ Watt's a far superior athlete to TJ, but the fact that TJ kind of had him to lean on and could say, hey, this is what I'm looking for, it makes it an easier transition. So that's one of the reasons why I love Lowell, but definitely a day 3 or day 4 prospect probably.
All right, let's move on to the pass rushers on the edge, defensive end. These guys come at a premium in the NFL. It seems like over the last couple of years, we've had a couple more dominant players at the position that have popped up, but teams are always looking for elite defensive ends and edge rushers. So far and away, I think we'd all agree that Bradley Chubb is the number 1 edge rusher in this class. But there's some discussion this week putting him up against last year's number 1 overall pick, Myles Garrett. Do you believe that Chubb might actually be better than Myles Garrett?
We're going to disagree. I already know it. So this is what I said. I think Chubb's a better football player. He is not as athletic as Myles Garrett, and I understand that. And that should be noted. That Garrett is absolutely more athletic. But athleticism does not always translate to football, and you guys know that. Like, you know what I mean? Just because you run a faster 40 or you bench more does not make you a better football player. And that's important to note. I think Chubb is a better football player than Myles Garrett is.
Why?
What? Ability to get after the quarterback, even though he doesn't have all the God-given traits that Garrett does. He still gets there. He still wreaks havoc. Like, he does all the things that Garrett does despite athletic, not being as athletic as Garrett. So to me, that just shows that he's a more intelligent football player, which will continue to grow at the next level.
Here's my deal. I wasn't going to get heated, but that you just –
I got you heated?
You switched the flip a little bit. Here's the deal. This narrative that's come out is 100% recency bias. Bradley Chubb is awesome. By no means do I want to take anything away from Bradley Chubb. If you listen to our podcast just a year ago, we're all sitting here drooling over how incredible a prospect Myles Garrett is. He gives you everything you could ever want. He's a character, A+. He's an intelligence, A+. On the board, he's an A+. Athleticism, A+++. Productivity, A+. Motor, A+. Now, all of a sudden, Bradley Chubb's a better player. Why? Because we're talking about this year's draft class. It's just a recency bias thing. Yeah, exactly. Oh, we haven't. You just haven't watched Myles Garrett highlights in a year. That's the issue. Listen, Bradley Chubb is excellent, and I think he's every bit worth literally whatever pick he goes. If the Browns take him number 1, it's brilliant. All right. If number 1, because they pair these two guys together, and you'd be in a lot of trouble. All right. Every pick he goes is great, and every team that passes on him, you better have been right, because this guy's going to wreak havoc. But to say he's a better player than Myles Garrett, who just a year ago we were saying is one of the best prospects in the last decade, is recency bias. And it's recency because, the tape is newer, and we can look back and say, Myles Garrett only had 7 sacks last year. We only played 11 games on a terrible team. He projects to double-digit sacks every year, and he's only going to get a lot better. There's nothing that Bradley Chubb does better than Myles Garrett, except do it with less God-given talent. So all due respect to him, but to say he's better than Myles Garrett is ridiculous.
I actually don't have anything to add to that, because I think you literally just hit every point that I wanted to make. And the biggest one being, like, I understand where Rocco's coming from. Like, you like the guy who has that little bit of extra passion from what you can tell, because he doesn't have those same measurables, but he's still getting it done. I'm just not sure that extra football player-esque passion is enough if he goes to a bad team, to be quite honest. Like Myles Garrett, it didn't matter where he went. You could try and single block him. You can try and double team him. You weren't stopping him. It wasn't going to happen. So I don't know. I just agree that it comes down to that we're watching this guy's tape right now. So that's what we're thinking.
Well, I think it's a combination of we're watching his tape right now and the fact that for as good as Myles Garrett was last year, I think we expected more. And maybe that's unfair to do, but like we all expected Myles Garrett to have like this phenomenal season, and he had a very good season, but not great. And now we're wondering if, okay, so he's athletic, and that's great, but is the athleticism enough? And Chubb seems to give you. I mean, he's 1 inch shorter, 6 pounds heavier than Garrett was coming out. You know what I mean? And their stats are really almost the same in terms of the combine numbers. You know what I mean? So for me, the difference is I actually think that we might see more of a caring attitude from Chubb.
Like you're saying that, but one of the things we were tipping our cap to Myles Garrett to last year was his nonstop effort, even though he was the best player on the field. Like, why do you all of a sudden now you don't think he cares? Just because Bradley Chubb's doing it with less God-given talent, he cares more?
Maybe it's not that he cares more, but like maybe it is just for me. Like we just saw Myles Garrett have maybe less than what we expected stats wise year.
7 sacks as a rookie is really hard.
In 11 games, I get
really
that.
hard.
I understand.
And he played for the Browns.
Yeah, I mean that's listen. Yeah, maybe it's our fault for expecting 15 sacks, but Jadeveon Clowney was a bust after his rookie year. He was terrible. Like, it's very, very difficult to understand the nuances of rushing the passer as a rookie. And again, I'm coming at this harsh, but I won't be surprised at all if these are the best 2 pass rushers over the next decade. You know, once Von Miller starts to fade off and stuff like that. But I mean, these 2 guys could go down as 2 of the top 20 sack artists of all time. I'm not going to be surprised. It's just, for me, it's the shiny new toy is better than the shiny new toy from last Christmas. It just is. when the fact is, it's probably not.
All right, let's talk about some more of these defensive ends here then. You know, a lot of debate about who's kind of next in line as an edge rusher in this class. So I'm going to throw the question out to you guys. Who do you see as the number 2 guy behind Chubb in this class?
I went with Marcus Davenport. I love the size, weight, speed ratio. Taller than Chubb and Garrett, a little bit lighter, but also a full second faster on his 40. Plays with a lot of tenacity. And honestly, I like that he played for a little bit of a smaller school. I think those guys really do have a chip. Like, I think people joke about it and are always pointing to it, but like, when a guy gets drafted high out of a smaller school like that, he definitely has something more to prove. And it's not just for him. It's kind of like, oh, well, this is also for, University of Texas, San Antonio, so it's also for North Dakota State. It's also for, so I absolutely think that plays into it. So I love the measurables, and I love his skill set, and I love the chip.
I picked Davenport as well, and just basically all the same things you said there. Also, when I watch him play, different size, but he reminds me a lot of Dwight Freeney. Just the speed he has, the strength off the sides, but he can still get around guys. Now, as big as he is, it's hard for him to get under guys the way that Freeney always has, but just as strong as Freeney, almost as fast as Freeney, but he's really big. So what he loses from not being able to get a spin move and get under a guy, he gains in being able to overpower him and get over a guy. So he reminds me a lot of Dwight Freeney.
I liked Davenport too, but I didn't go with him because I feel like he's a little too dependent on just the speed element of his game. I've done a complete 180 on this guy from where I was a couple months ago. I'm going with Arden Key from LSU. Look, I mean, the issue with Arden Key is 100% off-field concerns. No one is going to doubt this guy has the talent. He's got the length, the size, the ability. It's all off-field concerns. But why I've done the 180 was because from everything that I've read now, he wowed so many people in his interviews at the Combine with how much he's now dedicated himself to football. He's proven that he loves football. He doesn't want to lose it from this off-the-field nonsense. He's hired his own team of guys to work with him now privately on his skill set, on some of his moves off the edge. I couldn't have been more impressed with everything that I read about him. And then when you put on the tape and look at him play, he's dominant in every phase. So I think that if you can get past the off-field concerns, he's the clear number 2.
I have Harold Landry from Boston College there. Well, I like both of the guys you all mentioned too. I do think Arden Key is going to be a steal because he's not going in the first round. That's at least my expectation at this point, and that's going to be silly that he's going to be somebody's second player in their class. But for me, I took Harold Landry because I have on my note here that he has everything you can't teach, and he has the ability to learn the things you can. The thing that I love about him is every scouting report you'll read and every time you watch him, his jump off the snap is ridiculous. And what he lacks is then those secondary moves and the usage of his hands and things like that. Well, that's going to come with time. That's going to come with better coaching. You know, all due respect to Boston College, but that's not Nick Saban. You know, he's going to get to the league and have professional coaches, professional veterans around him that can teach him those moves as long as he's willing to learn, which I hope he is. You know, you never know, I guess, but that burst off the line and that ability to beat the tackle on the first step is rare. So I think as long as he, you know, I feel like I say this a lot on these podcasts, but if he gets in the right situation for his needs, this is a Pro Bowl player.
Yeah. All right. Give me a player at the edge rush position. Could be your traditional 4-3 defensive end, could be a 3-4 outside linebacker who you believe is underrated in this class.
See, I put Key in this group, and I said underrated because he's probably going to be a top 5 outside linebacker at this point. He really should be probably number 1 or 2. And as much as I think he has the ability to be as good as those top guys, last year he was a top 10 pick. If he would have came out last year, he would have been a top 10 pick. He didn't come out, and then everybody said he was going to be a top 10 pick for this year. Off the field issues and slow a really bad LSU team this year, or what we'll call a mediocre LSU team, which is a bad LSU team because if they're not competing for the national championship, that's unacceptable for them. So we'll call it a bad season in LSU. And now all of a sudden this guy is the 4th or 5th or 6th best rush linebacker in this group. No, he's not. He's absolutely not athletically. So if you get him in the right situation, like Miles said, and get him in a spot where he's going to be mentored a little bit and the off the field issues aren't going to be there, then this guy's a top 5 pass rusher in the league next year, or in the years to come. So we're talking about him in the same group as Chubb. You know what I mean? So
I took Dorrance Armstrong from Kansas here as my underrated guy. I see South pumping the fist. He's a guy. It's funny to say he's going to be a draft steal out of a guy who had a sack and a half last year. for Kansas. That was it. But even pro scouts are saying the guy just wasn't used right. And they play that even front. He was playing defensive end last year at 257. He's probably not going to be the end in the league. He's probably limited to that odd front, that 3-4 team that can play that outside linebacker. But for me, the guy's explosiveness is without a doubt going to be there. The production is scary for sure, but his moves are great. He's smooth. He's a good athlete, long arms, which is key there. And I just think, again, this is a day 3 guy, maybe late 3rd round, but it's probably a day 3 guy. Those are the types of guys where you want to pick a project that if you go ahead and coach him up right, now he's a solid starter for you. You got 2nd round value in the 5th. So I think that's Armstrong for me.
I'll just piggyback what you said there. I agree. Obviously, judging by the way that I threw the little fist pump in there. Well, Kansas is a doormat in the Big 12. Right. Like, they're bad. They're always on the field. They're always getting it run up on them. They always just look bad. Really, defensively, like, those guys are just kind of like there for formality. So the fact that he looked as good as he did in that defense amazes me. You kind of hit the nail on the head. He's going to be a guy who's going to be your 3-4 outside linebacker, come off the edge. He didn't run great at the combine. Not that worried about that, though. I'm going to agree with you. He's a later round pick with all that upside. To me, it screams the kind of situation where, like, he goes to the Giants when they transition to a 3-4 now, and then I hate the fact that they got him for the next 7 years. So right. I hope it doesn't happen, but I could see that kind of thing happening.
I picked Keith Sweat. Remember Keith Sweat? I picked Josh Sweat. I think he's underrated. He is a freak athlete. My man had a 39.5-inch vertical. No, that doesn't mean a lot, except for that you're a freak. And those are the kind of guys that make a difference, especially when he's probably going to go in the 4th or 5th round. And he's fast, 4.5, 340. And he had 7 sacks in the final 8 games of the season. And I think he's going to be a difference maker, especially for the value you can get him at. Plus, I'm going to call him Keith Sweat forever.
All right, guys, let's move over to the offensive side of the ball here. Not a whole lot of names have true first-round grades along the offensive line in general, but specifically at offensive tackle. Probably Mike McGlinchey seems to be a lock at this point to go in the first round. Number one, do you agree that he's a definite first rounder? But then beyond that, give me somebody else that you could see reasonably going in the first round.
I actually think you're going to see this is a positional need thing. It's offensive tackle. We just talked about the edge rushers being huge, and obviously we'll talk about quarterbacks being huge. Well, offensive tackle stops the one huge position from hurting your hugest position. Yeah. So teams are going to – listen, you have to clearly have a running back ranked higher or a corner ranked higher. So, yeah, McGlinchey, I agree, is totally a lock. We're going to see Connor Williams go. We're going to see Colton Millers go. We might still see Orlando Brown go. Guys like Tyrell Crosby and Martinez Rankin could go if these playoff teams like the Vikings, Patriots, the Eagles choose to address offensive tackle depth instead of possibly a starter at linebacker. It's just one of those things that no matter what the offensive tackle class looks like, they go before they should. Even if the class is great, look at 2013 draft. Didn't work out this way, but 3 of the top 4 picks were offensive tackles. Only one of them is any good, but that's not the question. The question is, when are they going to go? So if they're great, they go super early. If they're good, they go where great players go. And I think that's the situation we're in right now.
I think 3, maybe 4 end up going in the first round. I do think the teams tend to, be more willing to reach at this spot because of the need really to stop the guys in the last group that we talked about, these edge rushers who just come at you basically going bonzers. But I actually like, and I know this isn't like a really super popular pick, I like Colton Miller as like the next guy up. Like he doesn't get a ton of play, but like he had a pretty good showing at the combine. initially, when you looked at some of the stuff for him, a lot of it that was like, oh, he's just going to be a stiff. Like he's not really, there's nothing elite about him. But I think he's shown that even though he was inconsistent at times, he's got the potential because of his pure athleticism, his strength, his athletic ability, the way that he can move. Maybe he's a guy who's more of a right tackle, but I'm fine with that too, because we're in a day and age where you need bookends. So if you can get yourself a franchise right tackle, who cares? That's another position that you don't have to even think about. So to me, he's the next best guy up.
I absolutely think McGlinchey is the number one tackle in this class. I think he's a no-brainer first rounder. This, to me, I think we could see as many as 5. I just think it depends on when the run starts. And if you don't know what we're talking about when we say when the run starts, let's just say, for example, McGlinchey goes, 11, okay? And then, Connor Williams goes 13. Well, you know what? That just changed everything, because now guys are going to start reaching for the tackle because they don't want to get stuck.
We saw it with wide receiver, just to butt in. We saw it with wide receiver last year.
Yeah.
Nobody saw Mike Williams going 7, so John Ross goes 9.
Yep.
That happened.
And then it just spitfalls from there. But like it could absolutely happen, with the tackle position. And then we could see 6. You know what I mean? I think there are 6 guys that could potentially go. Although I think it probably stops with Orlando Brown. I think he's right on the cusp there. I think he's absolutely talented enough to do it, but he had such a poor combine that it's going to drop him a little bit. But I think we could see 6 if the run starts early enough. If the run starts in the top 10 and McGlinchey goes in the top 10, then absolutely we're going to see 5 or 6.
I have Colton Miller as my next guy, but a guy I do think is underrated and right under him. It's not getting a lot of press. I love Brian O'Neill from Pitt, and watching him play out here, he was a stud. And just back in 2015, he convinced some of the world, like us, that Nathan Peterman was okay because he gave him a lot of time to throw the ball. He convinced the world and the Bengals that Tyler Boyd was going to be a stud. I still think Tyler Boyd's going to be a good receiver. He let Quadri Olesen run for 1,121 yards. So the dude is really good, and I think you're going to get a bargain on him too.
He is one of the guys that I have in that 5 or 6 going. Top 6 tackles
in the first round.
Yeah, in the first round.
I don't think he'll go in the first round, but I won't be shocked if he does.
He's the guy that I think if we get to 5 or 6 that he'll be gone.
Okay.
So I had a follow-up question on offensive tackles, but I'm going to save it because I think we're going to kind of get into it as well at the guard position, because I know just from some pre-show discussion that we're going to have an interesting take on this. So guards, using a fashion term, are the new spring trend, so to speak. We're seeing them being selected more and more.
That's weird, man.
Near the top.
I can't let it go. It's weird.
It's weird, but it works. So
I like it.
Over the past couple of years, we're seeing them more and more near the top of the draft. A lot more of these can't miss labels. And this year we've got one with Quentin Nelson. So number one, do you kind of buy into that thought process of the guard position where we didn't used to talk about these kind of things? And I guess secondly, what's the best fit if a team near the top wants to take a guy like Nelson?
I think me and Miles are going to agree that Nelson should go to the Giants, but I think it's for very different reasons. I think Nelson is the best offensive lineman prospect in this draft class. With that being said, the Giants absolutely, if they're going to commit to Eli Manning for the next 2 or 3 years, they absolutely have to address the line. And therefore, you take the best. If they're going to stay at 2, or maybe I definitely buy in if they can trade back a couple of spots and still get him. But I don't know if they can trade unless Denver wants to jump up. I don't think you can trade back and still get Nelson. So I think the Giants take him at 2. They protect their $1 million quarterback with the best offensive lineman in this draft because it's their biggest need. They don't have a big need necessarily at left tackle or at right tackle. They have They do, but what I'm saying is they have offensive line. They need offensive line. They are in the position the Colts were in a couple of years where I don't care, just take one. You know what I mean? Well, in this case, they're going to get the best one, and that's why I'm okay with it.
My issue is, I'm never going to preach to draft for need because I think that's kind of silly and it's where teams get in trouble. But I do think at the top of the draft, you have to draft at elite positions. And for me, yeah, I hear you. The Giants need help everywhere on the line. And I do think, my mock is coming out Thursday and the Giants take Quentin Nelson. I think that's his ceiling. And I think his absolute floor is 7th to Tampa Bay. He'll be gone in that range somewhere. But for me, people are talking about this guy's can't miss. He's an absolutely draft him, plug him in, all-pro guard for 10 years. You're probably right. Good for you. Guess what? The 4 all-pro guards last year went a combined 0-3 in the playoffs this year. The 2 all-pro quarterbacks, their teams played each other in the Super Bowl. So, I mean, listen, no, the quarterback isn't everything. And no, it's not unimportant to have guards. And the Eagles guards are pretty good. The Vikings guards are pretty good. These teams that had good seasons have good lines. It's logic. It makes sense. But for me, if you're drafting at 2 or even down where the Colts are at 6, if I can get Bradley Chubb, I'm not even sort of thinking about a guard. No matter how good he is, I don't care. If I can get Saquon Barkley, I'm not even thinking about a guard. If I'm the Giants, I need a quarterback. I have to take Josh Rosen. I have to take Baker Mayfield or Sam Darnold or whichever one falls and whichever one's the apple of their eye. You don't take a guard at 2. These quote-unquote can't-miss guards in the top 10 have not worked. Jonathan Cooper, not a franchise guard for the Cardinals. Chance Warmack can't even start on his second team. It's not happening for him. So I feel like the quote-unquote can't-miss thing, if it's not at a position that's an important elite position, I'm not rolling the dice, even if it's a virtual guarantee that he's a great player. I just can't see it at guard. It makes no sense to me.
I think my thing with that too, though, Miles, is like you said, like you don't like to draft for need. Well, they are drafting for need, but it's also we're talking about a guy who is one of the top 3 prospects in this draft. Like in this draft class,
great, yeah, good for him.
Bradley and Nelson.
And now he's gonna block for Davis Webb for a 5-11 team for the next 10 years.
I mean, we're already under the assumption that they're not going to draft a quarterback. So if they're not going to draft a quarterback, don't draft Saquon Barkley and put him and Eli Manning behind a terrible offensive line.
Oh, I fully agree. The Giants are ridiculous to not draft a quarterback. Ridiculous. You're way too good to ever draft number 2 again. You have to get your quarterback right now.
You clearly don't read my mock drafts that are posted every Thursday on footballgoons.com, by the way, in a rotating schedule of goons, because I've said for the last 2 that Josh Rosen is still the pick. I think everything is a smokescreen. They cannot afford the drop-off from Eli to go back to try and figure out their next guy. They need to get the next guy in line right now. They don't want that drop-off. It's the most important position.
I think ultimately what it boils down to is you can look at the draft 2 ways. And yes, the draft is absolutely to get great players. Of course it is. And Quentin Nelson's going to be a great player. I don't want anything about my rant to take away from him, just like earlier about Chubb. Ultimately, though, the draft is to win games. And a guard is not the way to do that.
Yeah.
It's just not.
So let me ask this question then as kind of a follow-up overall to the offensive line position and as a way of wrapping things up. And I apologize if you had another guard or center that you want to talk about, but I think this will be more interesting. Are you more of the belief that taking these guys in the first round is the way to go? Or are you of the belief that maybe paying for them as a little more proven commodity in free agency is the right way to go?
Yeah, I think just to piggyback on what I just ranted about, I have no issue with the guard in the first round. I think when Dallas took Zach Martin, that's a great pick because where you are, you have no shot at an elite quarterback. And I don't even mean that situation because there was no reason for them to with Tony Romo in the fold. But if you're picking in the teens, Quentin Nelson is an awesome pick for you. If you're picking in the 20s, he's obviously you can't get the card to the podium fast enough. And that's why I do love guys like Isaiah Wynn and Will Hernandez. Like, they're going to be drafted properly and be Pro Bowl guards, but on winning teams, because those teams have quarterbacks or running backs or edge rushers or offensive tackles or corners that already help you win. So I don't have any issue with drafting offensive line. Now, if free agency is your route, I don't really have a preference there. I like the youth at the draft, but you're not all going to draft Pro Bowl linemen. You just can't. But for me, it's more the Quentin Nelson being a top 5 pick is a waste because you're in position to grab that quarterback.
My issue with going the free agency route is like 9 times out of 10, I feel like you're getting leftovers that people don't want and don't want to pay for. You know what I mean? Like, with every once in a while, you get the guy that like a team just can't afford. You know what I mean? Like the Andrew Norwells of the world. But even that, like, you're getting a used good. Like, and I know it's a little bit more of a sure thing because at least you know what the player is at that point, so you don't have to run the risk. But for the price tag that you pay for them, maybe the risk is a little bit more worth it. You know what I mean? Maybe not in the first, but in the second and the third and the fourth round. Like, that's how you build your line for 4 years, and then hopefully you can get those type of guys re-signed, and you don't wind up in a situation where you just don't have the money for those players. But if you don't have the money for your own team, you don't have the money for other teams' players either. So
it could just be that I come from a fan base where they've hit so often through the free agency route. The Eagles have paid for Jason Peters. They paid for John Runyon. Those worked out magnificently. So to me, I don't, there's something almost like
drafted Lane Johnson 3rd overall, 4th overall.
And you drafted Jason Kelsey and you drafted Trey Thomas. I mean,
yeah, so
it works both ways.
It does. But for me, I think there's a little bit of a peace of mind to me to not even have to think about worrying about the offensive line position in the draft. You could just keep going after those more elite position players, especially near the top of the draft, which is what I just want to pile up. All right. So, Deal, you got any thoughts on that?
No, I definitely see both sides. It is seeming more and more like once a guy gets to the point, after his 4th year or whatever, after his rookie contract, it is seeming like we are seeing a drop off, especially in the guards and tackles where they're going to another team and getting paid huge and it's not really paying off, as opposed to the guys that have gotten drafted and stayed with the team. So if he's wanting to get paid somewhere else and that team is willing to let him go after the 4th year, it's usually not a great sign for them. Like Kaleki Assembly, for example, hasn't been worth whatever 58 million or whatever he made in Oakland. So it seems like we are seeing that point where if a team is willing to let a guy go that they probably drafted high, and then he was pretty productive for them, but now he's going to make 50 million somewhere else and they're not willing to pay it. It's pretty telling to me.
Yeah, for sure. All right, guys, well, that's going to do it for this week's edition of the Football Goons podcast. Probably the most important thing to leave you with is that as of right now, and you could still vote at Football Goons on the Twitter, 75% of voters believe that Cooler Ranch.
It's because you two goons voted.
I never vote on our.
I have not left this podcast, and I wish this was a microphone and just.
I have more faith in our listeners than that. I don't know.
It ain't over. Listen, it's over.
Get out there and vote. I left this thing up there for a good 2-day period. So get out there and vote at Football Goons. We want a good sample size here, but early on, Cooler Ranch is out to a commanding lead. So listen, you're going to want to keep up with us on social media, not just because you can vote about Doritos, not just because of all of the other cool stuff that we talk about, but we like to hear from you. Facebook.com/footballgoons, at Football Goons on Twitter, and right here on our YouTube channel, the Football Goons channel. You could like, comment, subscribe to our videos, leave us feedback, comment during the shows. We like to interact and have some of that live feedback during the show as well. Make sure you are keeping it locked into footballgoons.com Each and every week on Thursday, a new goon is rotating through with their current mock draft. If Rocco would just read it, he would know that I was all over Josh Rosen to the Giants still. Clearly, he's not paying attention. Don't be like Rocco. Get out there and read it every single Thursday. It's good stuff, good write-ups. Fridays, we're breaking down a position at a time of the players who were buying their stock, the players who were not buying their stock, and the players who we think are just really underappreciated at their position. We've gone through a couple positions. Make sure you go and check those out. We'll catch you guys next time.